Yeah, thank you very much for joining the session today. Maybe we can start, Marina, with your introduction, please. Yeah,
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on your show. My name's Marina Grayson Farrell. I've been in localization for a long time, but more importantly, I've been all around many different aspects of localization in my life and my family and the work that I've done. And these days, I call myself the Localization Advocate. And that's sort of like the culmination of years of helping people. I think it's kind of the focus of my career now is being able to help people with training in things that they need to know, like loc tools. I hope to get into personal development because that's important to me. And there's so many aspects of localization, globalization, and global cultures. I'm an advocate for Earth, for global concerns. There's so much to be an advocate for. So I really love to be empowered in that way. And how did I get to this point? I like to think of it as helping people seeing things that are wrong and trying to fix things that are wrong, but also having a viewpoint of cultures and languages that kind of have helped me assist those who don't have that kind of worldview. So in my early career, I started off as graphic designer. I actually was working in the art and music and that kind of thing. And then I started working in localization in some of the early days, Boulder, Colorado, in a company called ILE, International Language Engineering. They became Lionbridge. And in those days, I was able to volunteer for what I thought were challenging languages, like Japanese, bidirectional, Arabic, Hebrew. And this smattering of handling so many files and so many languages in so many ways hands-on, that really gave me appreciation for how these languages work. And going through the years, I eventually became working with software developers and just learning some of the basics, HTML, that kind of thing. I started working for Pearson. And Pearson, I got a really good, hands-on experience with course development and then the internationalization of content and the difficulties and perhaps maybe the way that developers really don't get the chance to understand how languages work in web development. So just dealing with helping them sort out, why are there issues in a file? Why does one character break an entire file? That kind of thing. And I was telling you earlier, the biggest difficulty I think that the software developers face is the fact that they're trained to work in their language. Their focus is on what they know, and it's very technical. They're very good at what they do, but they're not able to see, okay, in a different language, the word order is different. The characters have to be handled specially. The direction of the page could be reversed. They don't realize this. So they hard code or they design with complete focus on the one language. So with all of this years of understanding how things work and having the ability to say, wait a second, you need to change things to make it work better.
I got to know about Marina from one of the articles you wrote about dangers of doing the internationalization at the later stage, not giving enough importance and value to the internationalization in your beginning of your software development process. I wanted to hear more around why it's important, and can you tell us a little bit more on that, please?
Sure. And I'm really happy that caught your eye, and I know it's intriguing to people, but I think the most important aspect of this is the danger that can happen. And I think, when you develop a product, you either sell it or you don't. You do things that make a product more usable for a world market. You may do something that makes it impossible for another user in another country to use it. But that's just a matter of selling and not selling. What gets to be very critically important is when it's a healthcare device and someone can die, or if it's a financial aspect where somebody's going to lose a lot of money because you've not understood what needs to be done to internationalize, globalize correctly. So lives can be lost. Even the examples I gave 3 examples because it's really important to show the extremes. The simple things that happen, oh, well, we lose sale. That's bad enough. But when people have loss of life or some kind of difficulty in that way, it's very important. And you'll see localization people in the healthcare fields are extremely smart and technical. And that's where the attention is the most important. Does everybody follow that? Maybe not. The examples I gave, I was showing one example from dear friend Joost Zertje, who you probably know wrote the book with Natalie Kelly, Found in Translation. And there's a lot of examples in that book. I think that book, even today, that was published a while ago, but even today in 2023, it's a very good collection of what can happen. Some stories are funny and some are sad, like the example of the gentleman who had a mysterious ailment and he came in and it turned out it was the word intoxicado that was misunderstood, which led to him eventually becoming paralyzed. And you see, if you had somebody that was a qualified interpreter, perhaps that could have been avoided. And the other example I talked about was a comma put in the wrong place. And so an aeronautics company lost millions and millions and millions. The commas are different throughout the world for punctuation. We use a decimal point in the US, but in the EU, we use a decimal comma. And in the end, that wasn't the exact problem, but it made it much worse because of that difference. And when you're dealing with legal contracts, you have to know. That's another important thing. And then the last example, my favorite, and I've actually talked about this on a Halloween scary stories segment, the Turkish dotless eye. And it's amazing to hear about this even to this day. Of course, mobile phone technology is much better. And because of Unicode, a lot of the issues are now solved. It's not a big problem. But the problem back then was so bad that I think it was one person jailed, 2 people jailed, and one person died. And because of that one error that no one knew about, because they weren't knowledgeable about this extra character that didn't appear, in the code base. And the biggest issue with that, it was a system that was mapped. It wasn't even a fresh database. It was remapped to make it fit from the old legacy system to Unicode. So a lot of these issues can creep up because it's an old system. They're trying to save money. It might be something where they don't realize there could be an issue. It could be all kinds of issues coming because there was not a internationalization mindset that something can go wrong and we have to make allowances. So yeah, the internationalization danger game is what I call it. And there's going to be more in the future with more, AI coming in. There's bias baked into AI we're even seeing now. And I think there's a lot of attention we need to pay. Even though the technology is changing, we still need to have an awareness. How does this tool, software, application, whatever it is, how does that going to work from one language to the other? And what do we need to do to ensure, especially for medical, financial, space technology, all of the emerging new types of technologies that are coming online, it's going to be a lot more to worry about, to pay attention to, and really get it right.
Yeah, I was just listening to all the use cases you're talking about just to showcase how important internationalization, doing it right, how expensive it is if you
Mhm.
don't. From your experience, what is your observation about developers or software teams? What could be the reasons why they don't take care of internationalization from the beginning? Is it could be a lack of knowledge, or is it like a time pressure? Like, I need to deliver the project on time. It's like accessible. What are your observations?
Oh, yeah. I think exactly like how you're saying, it's a combination where the developers, perhaps when they're in school, they're not given the scenario of this is very important. I think there's other scenarios that are popular and they're pushed first. If you're working agile, that makes a difficult scenario because you're always, working for just a limited time in a sprint. So you have to push things to the backload. So you have to keep working in that way and you never get ahead. Or if you're working with a team whose focus is really on accessibility. Maybe that's a popular trend. And so everybody's on the accessibility bandwagon. It's important to have accessible content. That's true. But you have to realize accessibility means international accessibility in addition to diversity of ability. And you have to really keep that in mind. And especially all of those scary stories that I talked about, keep those in top of your mind because that's what happens when you don't. And as everything comes on, paying attention to you have to allot time, you have to allot some money to the effort because you're going to pay what's so much more in the end if you don't do it right. What's the old thing? Measure twice, cut once. But the same thing goes with, from a carpenter viewpoint into internationalization and globalization. You have to make sure everything fits first. And I'm afraid that the pain points are what gets teams to finally wake up and realize, okay, we have to do this differently. So take the examples from what I've given and what you observe in the world, and then you're going to notice trends also. I've seen UX become an important aspect. It's popular and it's pushed up in through the ranks and it becomes adopted. Globalization should be ahead of it because it works hand in hand with UX. If a user can work in this iPhone, can they use it internationally? That's a user experience aspect. So they're hand in hand, they should be parallel in terms of budget and time.
Absolutely. And if I look back at my couple of years ago when I was working as a developer, it is like, yes, you know a little bit knowledge about, yes, you need to build the application, accessible, internationalization. I think you brought a very important topic that in terms of agile, you wanted to ship things faster, and you have a tight deadlines. And it was a kind of a triggering point where you take that priority. It comes from a business side of things. Hey, we wanted to expand. Okay, we are in US. Okay, we are doing, but now the business make a decision. So we are expanding to Europe market. You cannot just go with English. Let's go with other languages as well. That's where, as a developer, you start to think about: is my code is internationalized? If I have to do it, what I have to do. So that's kind of a tipping point. You start thinking about internationalization. It's more, what I'm trying to say is like more on it's a business driven priority rather than a kind of a checklist where I need to build a great user experience product to the internationalized market. So it's more driven by from the business. So from your experience, like what are the things, patterns you observed where when software teams try to give value for internationalization?
Yeah, that's very good. Those are all good points because you're going to see who's the one that asks for things to be internationalized, globalized, whatever. It usually comes from business. And it is interesting because they will identify a market. Okay, this area of the world is promising. We're going to push product toward that. And it would be so much better if the teams would work together. I think, the corporations I'm familiar with and many around the world, have these silos where you've got this team and you've got that team and they're all separate. But if they would share resources, share the maps going forward of all the product development, they could do so much better because they could have a common goal and say that you have, the marketing team identifies some kind of priority and, sales is going in another. Unify them all and come up with a tier strategy. We've seen that seems to work quite well. I'm not a strategist per se. There's many of my colleagues who are very good at that. But what I've seen is, having a focus and everyone working together. So you have, CJK is a focus, or if you want to have Europe, figs is usually the easiest. Then add in Eastern Europe and then the others and kind of go about each area, each region and add them on as needed. And then you're going to find, maybe there's a need for Middle Eastern. That's where you need to pause and make sure you do it correctly because the buy-die content is more complex and easy to get wrong. I've seen a lot of teams just plunge into that market and just throw the content in and many times not usable because everything has to be reversed. Even the navigation buttons on a frame need to be reversed for it to work. So I think some kind of initiative to unifying teams to work together and identify the tiers, break it into the places of the world that you're going to work. And then, of course, do that evaluation, see where things worked well. And then the money that you make from this great new markets, reinvest that into more markets. And ideally, that's the best way to go. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of companies just kind of blindly go to where the marketing suggests there could be possibilities without forethought and without coordination. And every team is on its own, kind of fighting the battle. They don't get good results. They lose out in those areas and they'd have a tendency to give up and just stick with English. Okay, that language was too hard. And why that happens is because there wasn't a buy-in. That's another thing I wanted to mention, Anil. The buy-in from somebody in a higher place in the company really helps. I've seen a few corporations not have that, but then you'll see the most successful, globally successful companies are the ones who have buy-in from the top down and they agree the importance. They build in localization at the core and they can do like a localization maturity model and show that there's really good results. They have the best market reaction. They're successful. The clients are happy and they take that success and invest it and go even farther. I think that's probably the best suggestion I can give is coordination.
That's great. That's great. I see that you running a localization community. One of the way to educate the software teams or any digital teams wanting to expand globalization. Can you tell us a little bit more on your localization community?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. Well, I see something missing and I have a tendency to want to fix that. In the localization community, I'm involved in a few. There's the networking community, which I always love to talk to people about. And those are great places, no matter if you're a localization engineer, PM, translator, all those types of roles in between will find value because we're building friendships and talking about things. And that's just the networking community in general. And then personally, I've created the LocTools study group. And this whole idea came about. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the long chart from NIMSY, which is called the Atlas, and it has something like 800 tools listed on it. And it's a brilliant, readout of all this tools that exist in the world. But to me, it was a bit of a challenge because, when I started, but I'm aware of all these other platforms and tools, Localize included. And I've always wondered, okay, I could go to the website and look up information from their academies and do that kind of thing. Wouldn't it be great to introduce all of the tools, as many as we can? So it's been a great initiative where I've invited my friends, colleagues, everybody I know on LinkedIn, and then they tell their friends. And so we've gotten together a very warm, supportive, community based method of learning, which to me is the most wonderful way to do it. And in that, I'm really honored to lead the effort. We do have others in the group who are assisting with taking notes and helping moderating and that kind of thing. But what's great about it is the group kind of goes forward, and now the tools are reaching out to me to get on the calendar. So far we've had amazing demonstrations. They're very informal. It's nothing, like you're going to get a certificate from attending, but you're going to get tips and information and even some background about the tools and how they were created. Some tools were created only for translators in mind, and then they added, interactivity for others. Other tools were created for PMs only in mind, and then they kind of went back and added translator features. So you're going to see every tool is a little different. A lot of them have a similarity. And the biggest reason, actually, Anil, that I feel so pleased to have this group is I can tell you there are job positions advertised where they have tools listed as requirements. And to me, I think everyone should have equal ability to apply for a job with the understanding that they have just even an understanding of the tool. You're not going to be well versed by watching a demo, but you're going to know a lot more than you did before. So I think it's a very good undertaking to have information about the tools available to everyone and the chance to ask questions right there. It's really great to have this going as a community. And I'm excited about the future too, because we're getting into so much more.
That's great. And where can people follow you so people can find out?
Oh, thank you so much. So yeah, I store everything on my LinkedIn group or page called the Localization Advocate. So if you look for that, within that, you're going to see information about the Loc Tools Study Group. Now, just to let you know, the Localization Advocate is my business. I started this as consulting for a localization idea, but the Loc Tools became a really important part of it. So I host the Loc Tools Study Group within my Localization Advocate page on LinkedIn. And I've made a special page that's right there pinned to the top so everyone can get access to the recordings, the notes. There's an events calendar in there so everyone can get information that they need. And then if you looked on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see the interviews I've done. I've actually have a podcast. I ran season 1 last year and actually a little bit before that. And I've interviewed some interesting people, including Yoast. So there's some interesting, sessions on my YouTube channel. And I have articles. You noticed Localization Explained is my newsletter. So you can find that on LinkedIn. That's Localization, Explained. And lots more content coming out. I'm going to start season 2 pretty soon with interviewing people, not just in localization, but interesting people that I've known. And that's going to be rebranded as A Day in Life, because I'm finding that the world's even bigger than our localization world because it's an international, global, and so many more interesting things to see. So go look on my profile, follow me, and you'll get a chance to see it all. And also, I wanted to tell you there's a new thing I'm working on, a localization starter kit. So for those who are new to localization, I have links to share with you, all of my articles and all of the things I know, plus all of the people I know. I'm putting that all together in a PDF to share. And then people who are new, you'd be surprised the people that attend our sessions. Maybe they're a localization engineer who've just started the company. There's one person who's a CTO of another company who's joining to learn about this stuff. And of course, language teachers, so many people. And of course, people brand new from university.
That's great. Where do you get inspiration? Like, do you follow some authors on LinkedIn, or do you have any recommendation blog posts you follow, or some authors you recommend us to follow?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. I just been around so many people and so many influences and such. I just kind of soak it in and it comes out. But I really like some of the really inspirational people that I know, and you'll find them on LinkedIn. Natalie Kelly is a really interesting and knowledgeable person. She was that co-author with Joost Zertje of the Found in Translation. She has a blog called Born to be Global. Born to be Global is probably the most suited for your audience because they are software focused, internationalization focused challenges. She proposes solutions. She proposes those kind of solutions that I complain about that people aren't getting. She's the one that shows exactly how to get the solutions. So I would definitely put Natalie Kelly's Born to be Global at the top of the list. And the other people you're going to find as you go through LinkedIn, you're going to see some really smart people emerging. You'll see people who are starting to integrate the AI tools. We're going to see the jury is still out about exactly how good that's going to be, but there's like a frenzy going on right now. So I would be open-minded and watching to see how things develop. And then in terms of other important trends, there's a very smart lady who has a UX blog, and I'm going to find the link for you now. I think the people who do colorful work that is very colorful, talking about UX, talking about how software needs to be integrated into all of this, those are the things we need to pay the most attention to and the things that we will learn a lot very quickly. The lady's name is Mikal Kessel Shidrit, and she helps localization and UX teams learn and communicate. And she has an awesome amount of offerings. She has a UX course that is all about localization, and she's a really smart one to watch out for. And her UX writing for Loc Experts course is very interesting. And her link you want to pay attention is called localizationstation.com. You might want to get her on your show as well. Super smart lady. She's out of Israel.
Well, that's great. Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for sharing all those useful links. Any final tips or any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you again for having me here and having a chance to talk about all this. And I just want to remind everyone to have an open mind about how someone else will need or someone else will work, someone else will think other than we do the way we are. That empathy of people, of regions, I think that's so badly needed. When you're able to empathize, you're able to try to understand. And if you can understand, you're going to really work for the solution because you know it's important to someone. And then you realize that's how you're really going to sell your product, is having the ability to be open and make it fit. And that's where the rewards come in. I think that is the big goal for everyone. So I almost want to say empathy is the guidance for internationalization, globalization.
That's great. Thank you very much, Marina.